Okay. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are going to be in Exodus somewhere. I think Exodus 22 is a good place to start. And we'll go on from there. But first, let's start with a word of prayer. That's the best place to start. Father God, tonight as we come together to study your word, we're thankful once again for the preservation of this book we call a Bible. We're thankful for the way that you led your people and the plans that you made physically that speak to your plans spiritually. And I pray tonight that the Holy Spirit would have an opportunity to come into our hearts and our minds and reveal some of these things to us, that we can just be in awe of how you see so far into the future that you plan things that revolve around our lives and lead us in this journey that we call life. I pray a special blessing upon Chris Van Sluten, that when he undergoes his surgery tomorrow, that you would guide the doctors and nurses in their hand, and give Tom and Molly some comfort tonight as well. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, Exodus 22. Let's start here. Are you ready, Norm? Exodus 22. Verses 1 through 4.
So that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be no blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. If the stolen beast is found alive in his possession, whether it is an ox or a donkey or a sheep, he shall pay double.
Okay. Here is the foundation of that principle that a man's home is his castle. And what God is saying here is, if a thief comes into your residence, your compound, and is attempting to steal something at night, if you kill him at night, no responsibility. You're off the hook. They can't come back at you for that. If it's in the daytime and you catch him, don't kill him. If you kill him, then what happens is you open yourself up for family to come and kill you. There was this next to kin thing that, and that's the blood guiltiness reference there. Blood guiltiness referred to a family member getting revenge for your killing one of theirs. And if it's at night and you can't see, because remember, you don't have lights, and you kill him, then you're all right. But if it's daylight, don't kill him. Capture him, stop him, whatever. And then, you see, if how does that work? If he has what he's stolen in his hand, then he has to give you that back plus. So you get double. And if he can't pay you back, then you sell him. You sell him as a slave. Hopefully you'll get something out of it. So Hammurabi, in his code, he said that if someone steals an ox, a sheep, a donkey, a pig, or a boat, I like that he's put a boat in there, and it belonged to the state, then he has to make 30-fold restitution. Whatever he stole, he's got to restore it plus times 30. And if he doesn't have the funds, you kill him. That was Hammurabi's code. And a lot of people are trying to say that Moses, he didn't really talk to God, that he got his information from Hammurabi. But there's quite a bit of difference. I read an article today that a scholar, somebody really smart, he has gone into archaeology and all kinds of modern equipment, and he has written a book. He's a teacher in some college, so you know he's smart. And he has written a book because he believes that modern archaeology has explained how we got our Bible. And the explanation goes something to this. The Israelite nation was tired of being kicked around, always in slavery, never having any kind of a reputation as being anything. So they went back into their history, and through mythology, they come up with these heroes. And so, David never had a kingdom. He was all made up. Saul, Solomon, all these guys. And because there's you can't find any archaeological proof that these guys existed. So they wrote all these stories to make it seem like Israel used to be something, even though today they're not. And I think, wow, this guy is really, it's too bad. Okay, I divert. Let's go to verses 5 through 9. Tim?
If anyone grazes their livestock in a field or vineyard and lets them stray, and they graze in someone else's field, the offender must make restitution from the best of their own field or vineyard.
And then through 9.
If a fire breaks out and spreads into thorn bushes so that it burns shocks of grain or standing grain or the whole field, the one who started the fire must make restitution. If anyone gives a neighbor silver or goods for safekeeping, and they are stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief, if caught, must pay back double. But if the thief is not found, the owner of the house must appear before the judges, and they must determine whether the owner of the house has laid hands on the other person's property. In all cases of illegal possession of an ox, a donkey, a sheep, a garment, or any other lost property about which somebody says, "This is mine," both parties are to bring their cases before the judges. The one whom the judge declares guilty must pay back double to the other.
First, verses 5 and 6. So you've got an animal that breaks away from you and goes into the neighbor's place. My brother-in-law, who's not religious at all, he must have been reading this, because last year he puts this garden, and then he hopes to sell the produce come late summer and fall. We live in the country. The the traffic going up and down the road really is not as such that people just, stop and buy things. But he's got this idea. And so he had everything planted. And one morning he went out to look over his domain, and in the soil were great big hoof marks. Now, my neighbors are Amish. They don't have small horses. They have some, but the ones that really got out were the work horses. And their footprints are unmistakable. I mean, they're big. And they trounced. I shouldn't laugh. They trounced through his garden, stomped down his corn that was about this high, which part of it they ate, and just tore it up. So he went down and demanded restitution. And he had it all figured out how much he was going to make 2.5 months later. And that's how much he wanted them to pay. And they said, we're not the only ones that have horses. How do you know they're ours? Do you have any cameras? Do you have any proof? Well, no, but you're the closest. And the Amish, you might think that they're kind of, bend over and take it kind of people, but they're not. And they said, unless you've got physical proof that it was our horses, I mean, you can come down and check their feet if you want, but because these horses are smart. They get out during the night, and by daylight, they're back inside the fence. Because I've had conversations, because deer hunting time, I come out to my blind, and there's the hoof prints all over. They've been in my woods, scaring all the deer away. And then when daylight comes, they're back in their, Abe, my neighbor, he said, oh yeah, Bruce, I apologize, but my horses are real sneaky. And I said, well, why don't you repair the fence? He says, have you seen the size of those horses? He says, I do repair the fence, and they just walk through it. But this is a case of if you catch them, then you've got to make restitution. And look at verse 6 especially. If one of these animals has been smoking and they drop their cigarette and the field catches on fire, then you've got a huge problem. And they've got to make restitution for that. I don't know how a fire would break out back then. It seemed to me that it would have to be started. I mean, you just don't. Well, they do, but it doesn't seem like they would be close to your field. Shepherds, those dirty. Because they're always walking around. Yeah. I don't know that they smoked, but maybe, they're carrying coals with them or something. Yeah. Now, that's an interesting piece, and probably was meant for the nation of Israel moving forward. But I always find it funny right there. Now, verses 7 through 9, we really have trouble with this in America because we're not used to this process at all. If we have something that is pretty valuable, we have safe deposit boxes, we have banks, we have mattresses, we have plastic boxes that fit in the water container, the back of the toilet. You put them in there. I've seen all of the detective shows. They always go there and look. That's where you keep your drugs. in this section here, they didn't have that. So if you had something valuable and you had to go away, because Robin lives so close to me, I would take all of my valuables and I would take all 35 of my miniature tractors, and I'd say, watch over these, don't let the girls near them. That would be real dumb, wouldn't it? I didn't have as many 40 years ago, but I had a collection way back then. And I had them all covered up in newspaper and kept in a closet because I didn't want, my kids were just beginning to be toddlers and 3, 5, 6 years old, and I didn't want them in that stuff. Jeannie and I were just newlyweds. And we combined our things into a house. And I was gone. And Michael, and he must have been 7 at the time, he comes racing out of our bedroom and he said, Mom, look what I found in Dad's closet. He had taken all of my collectible tractors and had them all out on the floor. And Jeannie, the blood just drained from her face. Because she wasn't able to restore that, if anything would happen to it. But this is the point it's saying. When you could entrust your valuables to your neighbor, and if you didn't have that, you just buried it in a field because you didn't have places to store this stuff. And if you gave it to your neighbor and something happens to it, the neighbor had to replace it. Do you think that it was a problem to get your neighbor to do that? I would think most neighbors would say, no way. I don't want the responsibility. But these people were different. Those Orientals, they were real neighborly. and they would take that on as a responsibility. And God says, if you're going to do that, you've got to watch out for it. And then let's go on to verses 10 through 13. Renee, you're up.
If a man gives a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to his neighbor for safekeeping, and it dies, or is injured, or is taken away while no one is looking, the issue between them is to be settled by the taking of an oath before the Lord that the neighbor did not lay hands on the other person's property. The owner is to accept this, and no restitution is required. But if the animal was stolen from the neighbor, he must make restitution to the owner. If it was torn to pieces by a wild animal, he shall bring in the remains as evidence, and he will not be required to pay for the torn animal.
This is so peculiar in our language because we're so cynical as a society. What it's saying here is if you give your animal to your neighbor to watch, and it runs away or it dies under your watch, or gets hurt, you sit down with the owner, and you say, before God, this is what happened. And the owner of that animal says, okay. Because in this scenario, lying is not even a possibility. Isn't that amazing? We have carried that through for centuries, that a man's word was good. And there are exceptions, but if you ever pay attention when you watch older shows, like our age shows, and you watch these old westerns or police shows, in an old western from the 50s or 60s, if the good guy captures the bad guy and says, go to jail, he walks right to the jail. You don't even have to take his gun. He just walks. Because in those days when you said you were going to do something or you weren't going to do something, people believed you. Today, we would say, there's no way on this planet that I'm taking your word for it. Here, you never had to make restitution if you said, I didn't do it. But if it's stolen, then you've got to make restitution to the owner. If it's torn in pieces and you can find the pieces, you just produce those and then you don't have to repay. Just an amazing thing. Now, this is why here, if it's torn in pieces, this is why the stories of shepherds, David included, were so extreme. Shepherds would risk their lives, literally, to rescue an animal in the grasp of a lion or a bear, because shepherds, by their very nature, were unable to ever pay restitution. They would be sold into slavery instead of being shepherds. So they would risk life and limb, literally, to retrieve that animal. And if all they can get from that animal is a head or a leg, that would be enough for them not to have to pay restitution. But they just wouldn't watch it get carried away. Because if a wolf come and took a lamb and you saw it running away and didn't go back and get it, you would be required to pay money, and shepherds couldn't do it. Yes, yeah. It wasn't. Yep. Most of the time, that the people who were shepherds were slaves to begin with, and that's why I've always taught for years that David was an illegitimate. His mom was there, but Jesse wasn't his biological father, which is why he had him guarding the sheep, because you wouldn't have your child do that. That was a horrible job. And David nonchalantly said to Saul, I'm not worried about a giant. Lion comes up, bear comes up. I just went there, took it right out of its mouth. I mean, what's the big deal? Shepherds did that because there was no way they could repay. So that's kind of an interesting piece there. Renee, you got your Bible hot there. Read verses 14 and 15.
If a man borrows an animal from his neighbor, and it is injured or dies while the owner is not present, he must make restitution. But if the owner is with the animal, the borrower will not have to pay. If the animal was hired, the money paid for the hire covers the loss.
Have you ever lent something to somebody and while they have it, it gets broke? Yeah. And how do you feel when they don't tell you it's broken until you go to use it? Doesn't that just grind you? Yes, it does. Just grinds you. Just tell me that you broke it. But don't wait until I'm going to use it and then all this, hey, what's wrong with this? You know? I hate to borrow things for that reason. Because I'm afraid that if it breaks, then I'm responsible for it. And I just hate to borrow stuff. And but if you ask me and I've got it, take it. Just tell me if you break it, okay? Just tell me. Oh, man. I was telling Dave before church started, when years and years ago when Jeannie and I were hand in hand, children's ministry, senior ministry, we probably went through 3 overhead projectors. Remember those old things? You used to be in smaller rooms than this, and you put the stuff on the glass, and they'd show up on the wall. We would buy one, and pretty soon, one of them doggone youth ministers would come around and say, hey, you mind if we borrow this? Not only would they not return it, when we finally would find where they had hidden it, it didn't work. And we'd buy another one pretty soon. Hey, do you mind if we borrow this? Go ahead. We'd find it. Didn't work. We had a lot of that going on. They borrow things, kids. You know, they're just kids. They would break it and not tell us. That's what God is saying. If you borrow something and you break it, talk to the owner right away. Now, if it's stolen, then, you know, you've got to pay it back. So, 16 and 17. Chuck, you're up.
If a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged and lies with her, he must pay a dowry for her to be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the dowry for virgins.
Now think about the stereotypical Jew, okay? Think about what you think about when you think about a stereotypical Jew. You found out that this guy raped your daughter. Now the law would say, first of all, well, he's got to marry her. If he doesn't marry her, he's got to pay you a dowry, and she stays with you. What do you think the majority of Jewish men did when they found out that their daughter had been raped? They wouldn't let the guy marry her because they got money for it. And there would be a guy come along after a while, marry the old maid. I mean, she's 20 now. Somebody's got to take her. And but they used that, and they wouldn't give her. Now, the Hebrew language has got 2 words for virgin. An espoused virgin, and a virgin who is not espoused. And an espoused virgin means that there's no boyfriend in the picture, not engaged, nothing. She's a virgin that has never been with a man. And a non-espoused virgin is someone that hasn't had sex yet, but is engaged. And they could be engaged up to a year before they got married. If she is engaged and gets raped, they handled that different. But if a virgin that was not with a man, didn't know a man, had no man around, if she got raped, they just killed the rapist. There's no trial, no talking about it. They just found him and they killed him. Mary was an espoused virgin. We know that Joseph was in the picture. But the village, no, that's not, they didn't consider her to be engaged. She was espoused. Which is why when she came back from seeing her Aunt Elizabeth, and all of a sudden she's got a baby bump, they wanted to find the person that did that, and if they couldn't find him, then they were going to kill her. It was just a tragic situation. And Mary was willing to put herself in that position. See, she knew all of that when the angel said, God's got a job for you. And it's going to require danger. Because you are not going to be known. You're not engaged. You're not having a boyfriend. And you're going to have a baby. Joseph, he knew what he was good. He knew he was going to marry her. But the engagement hadn't taken, no, there was nothing set in stone yet. And so she was in big trouble. And verse 18, Chuck.
If a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged and lies with her, he must pay a dowry with...
18.
Oh, okay. You shall not allow a sorceress to live.
Very different verses. Yeah.
It's all the translation.
The more enlightened the more enlightened have trouble with this verse because they say that there was no such thing. It was accusations that were false because there wasn't anybody that could actually communicate. And don't mind Saul and the witch at Endor. Don't confuse them with the facts. They say that it couldn't happen. But God put this in, that if you work with the talking to anybody but God, your history. And then verse 19, Chuck, can you read that one?
Whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death.
I mean, this one also, by the experts, is they can't explain why it's in there because they say that's impossible. Nobody does that. There is, absolutely. And this one is just sick. Bestiality is what it's called. In 1948, the psychologists, those people, estimated that 8% of the population in the world practiced bestiality. I don't know what it is today. I know that it still happens. And it's unbelievable to think that. Okay, let's go on. Robin. 20 through 27.
He who sacrifices to any god other than to the Lord alone shall surely be destroyed. You shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall not afflict any widow or orphan. If you afflict him at all, and if he does cry out to me, I will surely hear his cry. And my anger will be kindled, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless. If you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, you are not to act as a creditor to him. You shall not charge him interest. If you ever take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, you are to return it to him before the sun sets. For that is his only covering, it is his cloak for his body. What else shall he sleep in? And it shall come to me that, it shall come about that when he cries out to me, I will hear him, for I am gracious.
God says, I don't want you treating your own people the way you were treated. That's what the bottom line is. When you were in Egypt, they treated you horribly. If someone says, I'll pay you back, and you can take my cloak, take my coat, take my watch, take my wallet, as a good faith sign, even if they can't pay you back until the next day or the next week, come sunset, you return that merchandise to them. They still owe you the money, but you give them back their things. And doesn't sound logical in our world. But you see, God wanted these people to be different. And he said, you were mistreated when you were there in Egypt, and I don't want you doing that now. Okay, 23's got a lot more stuff in it. So, the Sabbath law in the land is in there, and how to treat enemy, if he's got a ox or donkey that's wandered away, take it back. And into my brother-in-law, if you see the neighbor's horses in your garden, don't take pictures of the thing. Take it back to him. Okay? Taking pictures doesn't help, all right? You can get the same result if you lead the horse back. Hey, guess what, Abe? This belongs to you. Tore up my garden. Taking pictures of it and then taking it down there and saying, look what happened. Your sneaky horse. Forget it. Then notice also in chapter 23 and verse 20, this is going to come. Remember last week I told you they're at Mount Sinai, and they're here at Mount Sinai encamped for almost 11 months. So when he talks about, I'm going to send an angel before you, this is in the future. They probably won't even remember this. But God is telling them today, this is what's going to happen down the road. Our God has told us that from the moment we come out of that baptistry, he is beginning to build us a home in glory that outshines the sun. It's not immediate. It's going to happen. And we forget that. God says, when I say something, it's going to happen. And what this is referring to, and we'll find it later on as we go through the Old Testament, that when they left and they were in that wilderness, there were so many times when they were marching right through hostile territory, and the hostiles never bothered them. Because God protected them like he said he would. Okay. This next part is just crazy. Chapter 24. Sally, would you read first two verses of chapter 24?
And the Lord said to Moses, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. You are to worship at a distance, but Moses alone is to approach the Lord. The others must not come near, and the people may not come up with him.
Okay. Right away, God says to Moses, I want you to come up and meet with me. And he divides the Israelites into three groups. Do you see that there? First group is Moses. And he gets to go where? He gets to come right up to God. The second group are who? And the 70 elders. And they can come, but they only get to come up to the mountain. And I don't know how far up they get to come, but they come up to the mountain, and then they have to stop. And the third group are the people. They don't even get to come to the mountain. Stay back. You guys are awful people. Stay back. I don't want you close to me. I don't want to be able to smell you. Stay back. There is a distinction drawn between God and the Israelites. And we see this parallel, and I wish I had my overhead projector right now. We see this parallel. When they're going to build the tabernacle, they put up a fence. And all the nations, the 12 tribes, camped around that fence. See? They can't come to the mountain, so they can't come only up to the fence. Inside the fence are where the priests are. And they can come up to the tabernacle itself. A couple of priests are chosen randomly every week, every day, and they can go in to the first section in the tabernacle called the holy place. But there is a smaller section in that tabernacle called the Holy of Holies. Only one person, the high priest. Not Moses. Moses can't go in there. Only the high priest. And he can only go in once a year. And he can never go in unless he's got blood with him. and Moses, he must have just been smiling because he's thinking to himself, big whoop. God comes into my tent, speaks to me face to face. I'm not worried about going into the Holy of Holies. He says, man, God and I, we're like this. You know, we play bridge every Thursday. We're just right there. So God says, I've got something I want to have happen. And Joe, you ready? Read verses 3 through 8, please.
When Moses went and told the people all the Lord's words and laws, they responded with one voice. Everything the Lord has said we will do. Moses then wrote down everything the had set. He got up early the next morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and set up 12 stone pillars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he sent young Israelite men, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as fellowship's offering to the Lord. Moses took half of the blood and put it in the bowls, and the other half he splashed against the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it to the people. He responded, we will do everything the Lord has said you shall, and we will obey. Moses then took the blood, sprinkled it on the table, and said, this is the blood of the covenant. The Lord has made with you according to all these words.
Yes. Now, I don't know how much of the covenant, when he refers to the covenant, how much it has, whether it's just chapters 20 through 22 or 23 or what, but Moses has written this book, and then he reads what he's written to the people, and they make these offerings and sacrifices, and as Moses is speaking, people are crowded around him, and there's a lot of jostling going on, a lot of pushing and shoving, because they have this weirdness about them, and that is if they could only get close enough to Moses that when he is throwing the blood, some of it can hit them. And if you can imagine a rock concert, and you've got people who are right up next to the stage, and there's jostling going on, and they're wanting to get close, there would be kids, maybe old adults, I can't imagine adults, but there would be kids who would just scream. If one of those guitar players or one of those singers had some of their sweat or some of their spit come out and fall on them, ah! They wouldn't wash that shirt again. The images that I have the most are from pictures of Elvis and the Beatles. The Beatles, those girls would just faint. You know, it was just crazy. But that's how these people were, because Moses was a rock star. Now, he's not going to be, but right now he's a rock star, and they can't get close enough to him. And the fact that he might throw some blood on them, wow. Take me now, God. I am ready to go. Moses threw blood on me. So, now we come to this part. Verses 9 through 11. And that must mean, yeah, please.
Then Moses went up with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. And they saw the God of Israel, and under his feet there appeared to be a pavement of sapphire, as clear as the sky itself. How far are you talking?
Through 11.
Yet he did not stretch out his hand against the nobles of the sons of Israel, and they saw God, and they ate and drank. Oh, sorry. No, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. Now turn to Ezekiel chapter 1. Ezekiel chapter 1. I can't find it. I don't know if I got it in my Bible. Oh, there it is. Ezekiel chapter 1. And you ready, Amy?
Sure.
Read verse 4.
As I looked, behold, a storm wind was coming from the north, a great cloud of fire flashing forth continually, and a bright light around it, and in its midst something like a glowing metal
And then read verses 22 through 28.
Now over the heads of the living beings there was something like an expanse, like the awesome gleam of crystal spread out over their heads. Under the expanse their wings were stretched out straight, one toward the other. Each one also had 2 wings covering its body on the one side and on the other. I also heard the sound of their wings like the sound of abundant waters as they went, like the voice of the Almighty, a sound of tumult like the sound of an army camp. Whenever they stood still, they dropped their wings. And there came a voice from above the expanse that was over their heads. Whenever they stood still, they dropped their wings. Now above the expanse that was over their heads, there was something resembling a throne, like lapis lazuli in appearance, and on that, which resembled a throne high up, was a figure with the appearance of a man. Then I noticed from the appearance of his loins and upward something like glowing metal that looked like fire all around within it. And from the appearance of his loins and downward I saw something like fire, and there was a radiance about him. As the appearance of the rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, so was the appearance of the surrounding radiance. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face and heard a voice speak.
You know, when we see rainbows today, we're so far from them. But isn't it amazing to be able to look up in the sky and see those colors? I mean, because there isn't a light shining on it, it's the sun. And yet, in the sky, there can be colors so vivid. Sometimes it's pale, but the ones that get me so excited are when those rainbows are so bright. Now, imagine not up in the sky, but they're as close to you or closer than I am. And I'm completely encased in rainbow. Brilliant. Your eyes are just trying to take in the image. Plus fire, glowing. This is a brilliant scene. Now, go over to Revelation, chapter 4. Ready? Read verse 1 through 6, please.
Which I had heard, like the sound of a trumpet speaking with me, said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after these things." Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was standing in heaven, and one sitting on the throne. And he who was standing was like a jasper stone and a sardius in appearance. And there was a rainbow around the throne, like an emerald in appearance. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and upon the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white garments and golden crowns on their heads. Out from the throne came flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder. And there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was something like a sea of glass, like crystal. And in the center and around the throne, 4 living creatures full of eyes in front and behind.
3 separate scriptures from 3 different periods. We've got the children of Israel as slaves have seen nothing like this, ever. By the time we get to Ezekiel, oh my goodness, there's been so many advances in technology. Now we've got brass, they've got the capabilities of making iron, they've got billows that can produce intense heat. I think by Ezekiel they've invented gunpowder. So all these advancements. And then we get to Revelation. And think about the technological advances that the Roman Empire, that Greece is responsible for. So we see these 3 modes, these 3 time periods, and in that still is the same thing. This being glows. I mean, his radiance is blinding. He sits on a throne on top of glass, crystal. You can see right through it. It's transparent. The 70 elders, when they come up, they're underneath this floor. So they look up and they're probably just seeing the feet. But they see through it and they can see all the other stuff above God. Moses comes up and he's right on the same level. He's looking at God, and of course he's not seeing God. God's a spirit. What he's seeing is God who is allowing himself to be in the form which the human mind can comprehend as a being. Don't know what it looked like, but it was amazing. How could you even pay attention to the details in terms of face and arms and that? When you got that rainbow, you've got the fire, you've got the lightning, incredible. And after God allows them to see him like that, oh, this is just something else. Verse 11. Not only did God not react when they saw him, but he invites them to sit down at this table and they have a meal. Oh, man. A meal. We're talking about food. Talking about wine. We're talking about hors d'oeuvres. We're talking about bread. Who cooked all that? Yes. Right from God's kitchen. Here it was, all set out for them to just sit down as human beings and eat food not prepared by human hands, not grown from human soil, just there. What that must have tasted like. Never again would they be able to have such food, but it reminds me of the amazing banquet when we have the wedding feast. And on that table will be set all of the people who identify with Jesus. Knees under the table, food like we can't imagine. Oh, and what a joyous occasion that's going to be. And God invited those 70, along with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and Moses. And what a conversation. What a conversation that must have been. Oh, wow. Okay, we're done.